Mark Kelly's office erupted in chaos today. Shouts, accusations, and a shocking confrontation no one saw coming. Stay with me as we break down exactly what happened behind closed doors and why this fight could change everything for his team. The office was unusually tense that Tuesday morning. Mark Kelly's usually composed demeanor showed cracks almost immediately as he walked in, catching the murmurs of his staff mid-conversation. Something had clearly gone wrong overnight, and the air was thick with unspoken frustration. Kelly slammed his hand lightly on the conference table, not in anger, but as a signal. This was serious, and everyone needed to focus. Voices fell silent, but the tension didn't. His staff exchanged wary glances, knowing full well that whatever unfolded next would set the tone for the rest of the day. "You've got to understand," Kelly began, his tone unusually sharp. "This isn't just about a missed report or a scheduling error. This impacts everything we're doing right now. Every decision counts." His eyes swept across the room, landing on his senior aides, as if daring them to meet his gaze. One of the aides tried to interject, a calm explanation ready on their lips, but Kelly cut them off mid-sentence. "No, I don't want excuses. I want accountability. I want clarity. Who made the call that derailed our plans?" The room felt like it was holding its breath. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak, yet Kelly's glare seemed to single someone out. Slowly, one of the senior aides stepped forward, her expression a mix of defiance and caution. "Mark, I think it's a combination of factors, but the biggest breakdown happened in communications with the legislative team. They missed the briefing you requested." "Missed the briefing?" Kelly nodded slowly. "Do you realize what that means? We can't afford these kinds of gaps, not when decisions are on the line that affect the entire office, the public perception, everything." His voice resonated off the walls, sharp enough to make even the most seasoned staff flinch. There was a pause. Kelly's eyes darted from person to person, assessing reactions, gauging sincerity. "I am asking for full transparency. I will not tolerate half-truths or deflections. If I find anyone hiding details, there will be consequences." His words lingered in the room, heavy and uncompromising. The aide took a deep breath. "Sir, it wasn't intentional. We were all trying to manage multiple crises at once. The team made a judgment call, but it didn't land as expected." "You tried?" Kelly's voice rose sharply. "You tried. That's not enough. We're not trying. We are executing." He leaned forward, resting his palms on the table, the veins on his hands visible under the office lighting. "I need to know who failed, and I need to know now." The meeting felt like it was holding its breath. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak, yet Kelly's glare seemed to single someone out. Slowly, one of the senior aides stepped forward, her expression a mix of defiance and caution. "Mark, I think it's a combination of factors, but the biggest breakdown happened in communications with the legislative team. They missed the briefing you requested." "Missed the briefing?" He shook his head slowly. "Do you realize what that means? We can't afford these kinds of gaps, not when decisions are on the line that affect the entire office, the public perception, everything." His voice resonated off the walls, sharp enough to make even the most seasoned staff flinch. There was a pause. Kelly's eyes darted from person to person, assessing reactions, gauging sincerity. "I am asking for full transparency. I will not tolerate half-truths or deflections. If I find anyone hiding details, there will be consequences." His words lingered in the room, heavy and uncompromising. The aide took a deep breath. "Sir, it wasn't intentional. We were all trying to manage multiple crises at once. The team made a judgment call, but it didn't land as expected." Kelly let out a long, slow exhale. "Trying isn't enough. We need results. I expect every detail from now on, no exceptions. I want a full report by the end of the day. Every action, every decision, documented and explained." Another staff member attempted to explain a mitigating factor, but Kelly raised a hand. "Don't interrupt. I'm listening, but I want clarity, not excuses. This office represents a commitment to the people, and we cannot falter." The meeting continued, tension palpable, as Kelly dissected every misstep, asking precise questions that left no room for vagueness. Each answer was met with a pointed follow-up, each explanation carefully evaluated. Even though the confrontation was intense, there was a strange rhythm to it. The staff, though nervous, began to understand the underlying method to Kelly's frustration. This wasn't about punishment alone. It was about accountability, learning from mistakes, and ensuring that no similar breakdown could occur in the future. By the time the first hour concluded, the room had shifted slightly. The tension remained, but a sense of purpose started to emerge. Kelly's insistence on transparency and detail, though intimidating, laid bare the office's vulnerabilities and strengths alike. The morning's argument set the tone for the entire week. Outside the office, news of the internal clash would not circulate widely, but internally, the message was clear. Mark Kelly expected nothing short of excellence, and there would be no tolerance for anything less. The tension from the morning didn't dissipate as the staff tried to regroup. Each aide returned to their desks, phones buzzing, laptops open, trying to retrace every step that led to the chaos. Emails were reread, notes cross-checked, and every pending task suddenly felt like walking on a tightrope. Kelly didn't retreat to his office. Instead, he remained in the common area, arms folded, eyes scanning the room as if silently reviewing every action from the past week. The staff could feel his presence even without words, a subtle pressure that reminded them every decision mattered, and there would be consequences for oversight. One aide cautiously approached him with a stack of reports. "Mark, I've consolidated the communications logs and legislative updates. Here's where things went off track." Kelly flipped through the pages, his expression unreadable. Every mistake, no matter how minor, was highlighted by the stark clarity of the documentation. "This is what I needed. Thank you. But this alone doesn't tell me everything. I need context, why each decision was made, and why there were delays. We can't just see the error. We need to understand the root cause." Across the room, murmurs grew quieter as the staff realized the stakes. This wasn't just a reprimand. It was an audit of judgment, efficiency, and competence under pressure. Suddenly, an urgent phone call pulled Kelly away to a private line. The office paused, waiting. Whispers floated across desks. Had the issue escalated further? Kelly's voice could be heard, firm and composed, though tinged with urgency. "No, that approach won't work. I need a solution by noon. There is no room for delay." Returning to the room after the call, Kelly addressed the staff directly. "We are behind because of gaps in execution, but that stops now. I will not allow these mistakes to compound. I expect everyone to double-check, triple-check, and anticipate problems before they arise. This is about leadership, attention to detail, and responsibility." An experienced aide attempted to provide reasoning for a prior oversight. "Sir, the legislative team was waiting on information from another office, and the delay wasn't fully in our control." Kelly's eyes locked onto them. Waiting on someone else? That is not a strategy. Waiting is passive. I need proactive solutions. If you know a process will fail, anticipate it, correct it before it happens. That's your role. He paused, letting the words sink in. The room was silent except for the soft click of keyboards and low hum of computers. Each staff member internally reviewed their own contributions, realizing that accountability wasn't optional, it was mandatory. Kelly's tone softened slightly as he continued. "I am not here to demean anyone. I am here to ensure that this office functions at its peak. Mistakes are opportunities for learning, but repeated mistakes are unacceptable." His gaze swept the room once more, and a sense of cautious relief followed. He wasn't attacking personally, yet the expectations were clear. Minutes later, a junior staff member timidly raised a concern about an upcoming briefing. "Sir, the information for tomorrow's session isn't fully verified. If we proceed, it could backfire publicly."
Vance's responses became more deliberate, fewer improvisations, more scripted language. The spontaneity that once defined his public persona was noticeably absent. He wasn't backing down, but he was adjusting. Adjustments signal recognition, and recognition confirms influence. Crockett, by contrast, gains something intangible but powerful: trust momentum. Not because she won, but because she demonstrated control without force. Audiences sensed it, Media framed it. Even critics acknowledged the composure. That kind of validation doesn't fade quickly. This is the part where many political moments quietly expire. But this one didn't, because the exchange had introduced a new standard, one that lingered beneath future debates. Whenever rhetoric escalated, comparisons followed. Whenever insinuations appeared, people remembered how easily they could collapse under calm scrutiny. That's a long shadow to cast, and it wasn't accidental. Crockett had understood something fundamental. Rumors don't survive exposure, they survive reaction. By denying it oxygen, she deprived it of purpose. What remained was the intent behind its use. And intent, once visible, is impossible to ignore. As days passed, the story stopped being about embarrassment and started being about recalibration. Who adjusts after pressure? Who stays grounded? Who controls narrative without needing volume? Those questions stayed alive, even as headlines moved on. And that's when it became clear. This moment wasn't fading. It was settling. The aftermath of the exchange hung in the air longer than anyone anticipated. Vance attempted to regain footing during subsequent interviews, but his responses carried the faint trace of restraint. Every sentence was measured, every pause intentional. Observers could almost trace the invisible imprint of Crockett's earlier maneuver on his posture, tone, and word choice. Hook 1. Notice how the slightest hesitation now speaks louder than any loud proclamation. This is where influence really shows. Meanwhile, Crockett continued her routine. She wasn't seeking headlines, she didn't announce victories. She simply continued addressing policies, debates, and public concerns with her trademark composure. Yet, behind the calm, the political landscape had shifted subtly but irrevocably. Hook 2. Here's the critical moment everyone missed. It's not what was said, but how others reacted silently around her. As news cycles moved forward, commentators tried to interpret the event, but the narrative had already tilted. The moment had cemented Crockett's image as someone who could withstand provocation without flinching, someone whose authority was not derived from volume, but from strategic presence. Analysts began referencing it in future coverage, often without realizing how quietly transformative it had been. Hook 3. Watch closely. The impact of these silent strategies often echoes longer than the loudest confrontation. Social media buzzed as snippets resurfaced, debates reignited, and audiences discussed who had truly emerged stronger. Crockett's maneuver became a study in influence and patience, demonstrating that control often comes not from aggression, but from composure and timing. Hook 4. And here's the subtle cue. Small reactions now tell a bigger story than any statement ever could. In the weeks that followed, political advisors cited the incident when crafting responses. Opponents approached interactions with caution. Allies used the moment to gauge messaging and tone. The exchange, which seemed brief at first, had ripple effects that extended far beyond the initial conversation. It had reset expectations, subtly shifted perceptions, and reaffirmed Crockett's position without a single overt claim to power. Hook 5. Finally, take note of the quiet but decisive influence. These are the moments that truly define political legacy. By the end, the exchange was more than a headline. It had become a benchmark. Audiences, commentators, and participants alike recognized the moment as a turning point in political discourse. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was undeniably effective. Crockett's calm authority had rewritten the rules of engagement, showing that influence often speaks in the pauses, the choices, and the quiet mastery of presence. The story concluded, but the echoes lingered. Political circles, media analysts, and informed audiences continued to dissect the event, each insight reinforcing a simple truth. Composure and strategy can outlast any loud outburst, and the quiet execution of power often leaves the lasting impression.
Kelly took a moment to step back and observe the workflow. Every team member was engaged, the pace steady and the focus unwavering. The previous morning's outburst had left a mark, but it had also instilled clarity and resolve. He concluded the day with a brief address. "We've regained control, but we are not finished. Tomorrow the same standards apply. Mistakes are opportunities to learn, but complacency is unacceptable. Stay diligent, stay transparent, and anticipate every challenge before it becomes a crisis." The message was clear. Leadership demanded accountability, foresight, and the courage to confront issues head-on. And while the office had weathered the storm of the day, the lessons of that fight would resonate long into future challenges. As evening settled, the office took on a quieter, more focused energy. The earlier morning chaos seemed distant, yet its impact lingered in every decision made and every word spoken. Kelly remained at his desk, reviewing reports, cross-checking communications, and preparing for the next critical briefing. He understood that recovery wasn't just about regaining order, it was about reinforcing discipline, expectations, and accountability across the team. One of his senior aides approached, nervous yet determined. "Sir, the external teams are questioning our coordination on the latest directive. They're concerned about delays and conflicting instructions." Kelly's gaze was steady. "Then we fix it before it becomes a public problem. Every delay you anticipate and resolve internally prevents scrutiny externally. I don't want excuses, I want solutions." The staff absorbed this as more than instructions. They recognized it as a standard for performance. Kelly's approach was consistent, calm, assertive, and unwavering. Every staffer learned quickly that preparation, foresight, and accuracy were paramount. At that moment, a sudden email flagged a potential leak to the press. Panic could have easily spread, but Kelly reacted with calculated precision. Gather the facts, determine the source, address the breach internally before anyone else does. We cannot allow speculation to dictate our actions. Junior staffers watched him coordinate, delegating tasks while maintaining oversight on the critical items. It became clear the earlier confrontation, the shouting match, had shifted the office dynamic. What could have been chaos became a training ground for accountability under pressure. Kelly moved to a whiteboard, outlining a revised plan of action for the week. Each point was deliberate. Deadlines, checkpoints, communications, and verification measures. Every staff member was required to understand not just the what, but the why. "Complacency ends now," Kelly stated firmly. "We cannot afford assumptions. Every task you complete must withstand scrutiny, internal and external. Mistakes are costly, hesitations are costly. Clarity, precision, and foresight are the only acceptable standards." The team implemented changes swiftly. Cross-checks became routine, progress reports were standardized, and any ambiguities were clarified immediately. Kelly's presence wasn't about intimidation, it was about creating a culture where every member could act decisively, confidently, and responsibly. Late into the evening, a small but significant breakthrough occurred. A miscommunication that could have delayed a critical decision was corrected. Kelly's calm intervention prevented further issues. The office collectively exhaled, a subtle sense of accomplishment, but no room for complacency. Before leaving, Kelly addressed the team once more. "Today tested our limits. Tomorrow will test our consistency. Remember, accountability is not optional. Preparation is non-negotiable, and your responsibility extends beyond the obvious tasks. Anticipate, execute, and communicate. Everything else follows." As staff packed up, there was a newfound sense of cohesion. The earlier morning shouting match, while intense and unsettling, had catalyzed clarity, heightened awareness, and reinforced standards. The office understood that leadership required both accountability and composure, and that Kelly's method, though demanding, ensured the organization could withstand both internal and external pressures. The day ended not with applause or relief, but with an unspoken acknowledgement. The fight earlier was a turning point. The office had survived the chaos, learned from it, and emerged stronger, more disciplined, and ready for the challenges that lay ahead.